The morning sun beat down on Penelope Jensen's cracked lips as she poured the last of her well water into the trough, watching her three horses drink deeply while her own stomach twisted with hunger she had learned to ignore. She had not eaten in 2 days, but the animals depended on her, and that was all that mattered in this unforgiving corner of Quartzsite, Arizona, where the summer of 1884 showed no mercy to those who had fallen on hard times. Her husband had been dead for 8 months now, taken by a fever that swept through faster than anyone could have predicted, and the small ranch they had built together was crumbling around her like the adobe walls that needed constant repair. The chickens pecked at the scattered corn she had just given them, precious grain she had been saving for herself, but could not bring herself to consume while they clucked hungrily at her feet. Her milk cow, old Bessie, lowed softly as Penelope ran her hand along the animal's flank, feeling the ribs that showed too prominently beneath the hide. "I know, girl," Penelope whispered, her voice hoarse from dehydration and lack of use. "We are all struggling, but we will get through this together." She had sold nearly everything of value to pay the debts her husband had left behind, debts she had not known existed until the banker came knocking with papers and a sympathetic expression that did nothing to ease the burden. The land was all she had left, 40 acres of stubborn desert that refused to yield much beyond scrub brush and heartache, but it was hers, and she would die before she let anyone take it from her. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn, shielding her eyes against the glare of the sun as a figure approached on horseback. Strangers were not uncommon in these parts, drifters and cowboys moving between ranches and towns, but something about the way this man sat his horse suggested purpose rather than aimless wandering. As he drew closer, she could make out his features. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair beneath a worn Stetson and eyes that seemed to take in everything with a single glance. He pulled his horse to a stop near her fence, tipping his hat politely. "Madam, name is Marcus Sullivan. I was passing through and noticed your windmill is not turning. Might be I could take a look at it for you, if you would not mind." Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. She had not spoken to anyone in nearly a week, and the kindness in his voice made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Sullivan, but I have no money to pay you for repairs." Marcus swung down from his horse with an easy grace, landing lightly despite his size. "Did not ask for payment, madam, just offering to help a neighbor." "We are not neighbors," she said, more sharply than she intended. "I do not even know you." "True enough," he agreed, his expression never changing from that calm, steady regard. "But that does not mean I cannot lend a hand. Your animals look thirsty, and if that windmill is not working, you are going to have a hard time keeping them watered in this heat." She wanted to refuse, to send him away with her pride intact, but the truth was, she had been trying to fix the windmill for 3 days and had no idea what she was doing wrong. Her husband had always handled such things, and she was learning the hard way that running a ranch alone required skills she had never needed to develop. "All right," she said finally, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Thank you." Marcus tied his horse to the fence and walked toward the windmill, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. Penelope watched as he climbed the wooden structure with sure movements, examining the blades and the pump mechanism with practiced efficiency. She found herself studying him despite her better judgment, noting the way his shirt stretched across his back, the confident set of his jaw, the gentle way he handled even the rusted metal of the broken parts. "Your bearing is seized up," he called down after a few minutes. "Got some grease in my saddlebag that should fix it right up. Might take me an hour or so to get it working properly again." "I will fetch you some water," Penelope said, then remembered, with a sinking feeling, that she had given the last of it to the animals. Or perhaps not. "I seem to be out at the moment." Marcus looked down at her, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. He climbed down quickly and walked to his horse, rummaging through his saddlebags until he produced a canteen. "Here, drink this. You look like you need it more than I do." "I cannot take your water," she protested, even as her body screamed for the moisture. You can and you will, he said firmly, pressing the canteen into her hands. There is a creek about 2 miles east of here where I can refill it. Drink, madam. Please. The water was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted, and she had to force herself not to gulp it down too quickly. When she lowered the canteen, she saw Marcus watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something between concern and determination. When did you last eat? He asked quietly. I am fine, she lied, but her stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, betraying her. Marcus was silent for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. I am going to fix your windmill, and then I am going to ride into town and get some supplies. I will be back before dark. Mr. Sullivan, I already told you I have no money. And I already told you I did not ask for any, he replied, his tone gentle but brooking no argument. Now, why don't you go sit in the shade while I work on this windmill? You look like you are about to fall over, and it will not help anyone if you collapse out here in the sun. She wanted to argue, to insist that she was perfectly capable of standing in her own yard, but the truth was she felt dizzy and weak, and the idea of sitting down was almost unbearably appealing. She made her way to the small porch of her adobe house and sank onto the wooden bench there, watching as Marcus climbed back up the windmill and set to work. The sound of metal on metal rang out across the silent desert as he worked, a steady rhythm that was somehow comforting. Penelope found her eyelids growing heavy, and before she realized what was happening, she had dozed off, exhausted from days of poor sleep and inadequate food. She woke to the sound of the windmill turning, its blades catching the afternoon breeze and sending water gurgling into the storage tank. Marcus stood beneath it, wiping his hands on a rag and looking satisfied with his work. When he noticed she was awake, he walked over to the porch. All fixed, he announced. Should work fine now as long as you grease it every few months. I will show you how before I leave. Thank you, Penelope said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. I do not know how to repay you for your kindness. No repayment necessary, Marcus said. Now I am going to head into town for those supplies. Is there anything in particular you or your animals need? She wanted to refuse again, to cling to her pride and independence, but looking at her thin horses and the desperate state of her pantry, she could not bring herself to do it. Oats for the horses, if you could, and corn for the chickens. They have been on short rations for too long. And for you, he pressed. I will manage, she said, but he gave her a look that said he did not believe her for a second. I will get what is needed, he said simply. And before she could protest further, he had mounted his horse and was riding away, leaving her alone with her confusion and gratitude. True to his word, Marcus returned just as the sun was beginning to set, his horse laden with burlap sacks and wrapped packages. Penelope had spent the intervening hours in a state of anxious anticipation, alternating between hoping he would return and fearing what his continued kindness might mean. She was not accustomed to charity, and the vulnerability of her position made her uncomfortable in ways she could not quite articulate. He unloaded the supplies onto her porch with efficiency, and she saw that he had brought far more than she had requested. There were sacks of oats and corn, yes, but also flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, sugar, and even a few precious eggs cushioned carefully in straw. Mr. Sullivan, this is too much, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I cannot possibly accept all of this. The animals need to eat, and so do you, he said matter-of-factly. Now, I am going to feed your horses and chickens while you start cooking something for dinner. And before you argue, know that I have not had a home-cooked meal in 3 months, and I am hoping you might take pity on a hungry cowboy. There was something in his tone, a deliberate lightness that told her he was giving her a way to accept his help without feeling like a charity case, and she was grateful for his tact. I suppose I could make biscuits and beans, she said slowly, if you are willing to wait while they cook. I have got nothing but time, Marcus replied, and the smile he gave her made something flutter in her chest that she had thought died with her husband. While he tended to her animals, Penelope went inside and surveyed her tiny kitchen with new eyes. The supplies he had brought represented more food than she had seen in months, and she felt tears prick her eyes as she began measuring flour for biscuits. She had been so focused on survival, on just making it through one more day, that she had forgotten what it felt like to have enough, to be able to cook a proper meal without counting every bean and scrap. The kitchen warmed as she worked, building up the fire in her small stove and setting the beans to simmer with pieces of the salt pork. The smell alone was enough to make her stomach cramp with hunger, but she forced herself to work slowly and carefully, determined to make a meal worthy of the kindness this stranger had shown her. Outside, she could hear Marcus talking softly to the horses as he fed them, his voice a low rumble that carried through the open window. There was something inherently comforting about having another person nearby, someone whose presence filled the lonely spaces that had grown too familiar over the past months. When he came inside, ducking slightly through the low doorway, the small house seemed to shrink around his large frame. He removed his hat and stood awkwardly for a moment, clearly trying to be respectful of her space. "You can sit at the table," Penelope said, gesturing to the rough-hewn wooden table that dominated the main room. "Dinner will be ready shortly." Marcus sat, and she was acutely aware of his presence as she moved around the kitchen, pulling the biscuits from the oven and dishing up the beans. She had not shared a meal with anyone since her husband's death, and the intimacy of the moment felt both strange and achingly familiar. When she set the plates on the table, Marcus waited until she was seated before picking up his fork, a small gesture of manners that spoke of an upbringing she had not expected from a drifting cowboy. They ate in silence for a few minutes, and Penelope found herself savoring every bite, the food tasting better than anything she could remember. "This is wonderful," Marcus said finally, breaking the silence. "Thank you for sharing your table with me." "I should be thanking you," Penelope replied. "Without your generosity, there would be no table to share." He shook his head. "You would have found a way. I can see it in you, that determination. You are a survivor." "I am not sure I feel like one most days," she admitted, surprised at her own honesty. "There are times when I wonder if I am just delaying the inevitable, if I am fighting a battle I cannot possibly win." "What makes you say that?" he asked, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart race. "I have 40 acres of land that barely produces enough to keep the animals alive, let alone turn a profit. I have debts that seem to grow faster than I can pay them down, and I am a woman alone in a place where that means I am seen as either prey or a burden." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, months of fear and frustration finally finding voice. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "If you do not mind me asking, what kind of debts are we talking about?" "My husband borrowed money to buy equipment for expanding the ranch," Penelope explained, staring down at her plate. "He had plans, dreams of turning this place into something more than just a small holding, but he died before any of those plans could come to fruition, and the bank still wants their money. I have been selling everything I can to make the payments, but I am running out of things to sell." "How much do you owe?" Marcus asked. $300, she said, the number feeling impossibly large. "I have paid down nearly 200 already, but the interest keeps adding up, and I am not making enough to keep pace with it." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on the table. $300 is not an insurmountable amount, not if you had the right approach to making this land work for you. "What do you mean?" Penelope asked, looking up at him with cautious hope. "This area is good for cattle, even if it is not ideal for crops," he said. "With the right grazing management and access to water, which you now have thanks to that windmill, you could run a decent herd on 40 acres. Not a huge operation, but enough to generate steady income. Cattle require money to purchase in the first place," she pointed out. "Money I do not have." "True," he agreed. "But there are other options. I have been working as a ranch hand for the past 5 years, saving my wages because I wanted to start my own spread someday. I have got enough put aside to buy a small starter herd, but I have been looking for the right piece of land. Maybe we could help each other." Penelope's heart began to race, but this time with something that felt uncomfortably like hope. "What are you proposing, Mr. Sullivan?" "Call me Marcus," he said. "And what I am proposing is a partnership. You have the land, and I have the capital. We pool our resources, build up a herd together, and split the profits. It would give you a way to pay off your debts and keep your ranch, and it would give me the opportunity to finally start building something of my own." "You want to go into business with a woman you just met?" she asked incredulously. "That seems remarkably foolish, if you do not mind me saying so." Marcus laughed, a warm sound that filled the small house. "Maybe it is foolish, but I have learned to trust my instincts about people, and my instincts tell me you are someone worth taking a chance on. Besides, I have been drifting for too long. It is time I put down roots somewhere, and this place feels right." Penelope wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this offer was genuine and not some elaborate scheme to take advantage of her vulnerable position. But life had taught her to be cautious, to question motives, and guard against disappointment. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. "It is a generous offer, but it is also a big decision, and I do not make big decisions lightly." "Fair enough," Marcus said easily. "Take all the time you need. In the meantime, if it is all right with you, I would like to stick around for a few days. I can help with some of the repairs I noticed around the property, and you can get to know me a little better before making up your mind." "Where would you stay?" Penelope asked, suddenly acutely aware of the impropriety of the situation. "I cannot have you sleeping in my house unchaperoned. People would talk." "I noticed you have a barn," Marcus said. "I have slept in worse places, and it would be perfectly respectable. I will stay out of your way and only come to the house when invited." She considered this, weighing the risk against the potential reward. Finally, she nodded. "All right, you can stay in the barn for a few days while I consider your proposal, but I make no promises beyond that." "That is all I ask," Marcus said, and the genuine smile he gave her made her chest tighten in ways she was not ready to examine too closely. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and Penelope found herself relaxing in his presence in a way she had not expected. When the dishes were cleared and washed, Marcus excused himself to tend to his horse and settle into the barn, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the lingering warmth of human connection. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Penelope stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of the day's events. A stranger had appeared in her life like an answer to prayers she had been too proud to voice, offering help and hope in equal measure. It seemed too good to be true, which made her suspicious even as every instinct told her that Marcus Sullivan was exactly what he appeared to be, a good man looking for a place to belong. The next morning, she woke to the sound of hammering and emerged from the house to find Marcus already at work repairing the chicken coop, which had been listing dangerously to one side for weeks. He had his shirt sleeves rolled up, and she found herself watching the play of muscles in his forearms as he worked, then quickly looked away, embarrassed by her own thoughts. "Good morning," she called out, and he turned to give her a wave. "Morning. Hope I did not wake you. I wanted to get started early before the heat gets too bad." "You did not wake me," she assured him. "Can I make you some breakfast?" "If it is not too much trouble, that would be wonderful." Penelope went back inside and set about making coffee and frying up some of the salt pork with eggs. She found herself humming as she worked, a habit she had lost somewhere in the dark months after her husband's death. When she brought the food out to the porch and called Marcus over, she realized she was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in longer than she could remember. They ate together on the porch, watching the sun climb higher in the sky and turn the desert landscape golden. Marcus told her about his life, how he had grown up in Texas on a small ranch before his parents died, and he was forced to hire out as a ranch hand. He spoke of the places he had been and the things he had learned, painting a picture of a man who was skilled, hardworking, and deeply lonely, though he never said that last part out loud. "What about you?" he asked when he had finished. "How did you end up in Quartzsite?" Penelope told him about meeting her husband in California, where her family had moved during her childhood. He had been charming and ambitious, full of plans for the future, and she had been young and eager for adventure. They had come to Arizona together to claim land and build a life, and for a while it had been good, hard but good. Then the fever came, and everything had fallen apart. "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked quietly. "Coming here, I mean." "Sometimes," she admitted. "But regret does not change anything. All we can do is keep moving forward and make the best of what we have." "That is a wise philosophy," Marcus said, and something in his tone made her look at him more closely. "But you do not entirely agree with it," she guessed. "I think there is wisdom in it," he said carefully. "But I also think there is value in looking back sometimes, in learning from our mistakes and the mistakes of others. The key is not getting stuck there, not letting the past define everything that comes after." They talked for hours, discovering shared views on everything from the best way to break a horse to the challenges facing small ranchers in an era of increasing consolidation. Penelope found herself opening up in ways she had not done with anyone, sharing fears and hopes she had kept locked away for fear of seeming weak or foolish. Over the next 3 days, a pattern emerged. Marcus would rise early and work on repairs around the property, fixing everything from broken fence rails to the leaking roof of the barn. Penelope would cook meals for both of them, and they would eat together and talk, gradually building a foundation of trust and friendship that felt both natural and slightly terrifying in its intensity. On the fourth morning, Penelope woke with a sense of clarity she had not felt in months. She found Marcus in the barn, mucking out the stalls, and stood in the doorway watching him work for a moment before speaking. "I have made my decision," she said, and he turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "I accept your partnership offer, but I have some conditions." "I am listening," Marcus said, setting aside his pitchfork and giving her his full attention. "First, everything needs to be documented in writing, drawn up by a lawyer so there is no confusion about the terms. Second, we split all expenses and profits equally, 50-50. Third, any major decisions about the ranch need to be agreed upon by both of us. And fourth, this remains a business arrangement, nothing more." That last condition was as much for her own protection as anything else. She was acutely aware of the attraction she felt toward Marcus, and the last thing she needed was to complicate a business partnership with romantic feelings that might not be reciprocated. If Marcus was disappointed by that final condition, he did not show it. "Those terms sound fair to me. I will ride into town today and speak to the lawyer about drawing up the papers. In the meantime, I can start looking at cattle prices and figuring out what we can afford for our starter herd." "Thank you, Marcus," Penelope said, and impulsively reached out to clasp his hand. "I know this is a risk for you, and I promise you will not regret it." His hand was warm and calloused around hers, and he squeezed gently before letting go. "I know I will not regret it. You are going to make this work, Penelope. We both are." The use of her first name sent a little thrill through her, but she pushed the feeling aside and focused on the practical matters at hand. They spent the rest of the morning going over the ranch's finances and making lists of everything that needed to be purchased or repaired. Marcus proved to have a sharp mind for numbers and a practical approach to problem solving that complemented her own strengths perfectly. When he rode into town that afternoon, Penelope found herself watching him go with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She had gambled everything on a man she had known for less than a week, trusting instincts that had not always served her well in the past. But something about Marcus felt different, solid in a way that had nothing to do with his physical presence and everything to do with the quiet integrity she saw in his every action. He returned as the sun was setting, papers in hand and a satisfied expression on his face. "The lawyer drew up a partnership agreement that I think you will find satisfactory," he said, handing her the documents. I took the liberty of having him include a clause about either partner being able to buy out the other at fair market value if things do not work out. Penelope read through the papers carefully, noting that Marcus had been scrupulously fair in every detail. The agreement spelled out their equal ownership and decision-making power, outlined procedures for handling disputes, and protected both of their interests in ways that demonstrated a level of thoughtfulness she deeply appreciated. "This looks good," she said finally. "But we should both sleep on it before signing anything. That way there is no question that we entered into this with clear heads." "Agreed," Marcus said, "though I will say my mind is already made up. I want this partnership, Penelope. I want to build something here with you." The intensity in his voice made her breath catch, and she had to remind herself that he was talking about business, nothing more. "I want it too," she admitted. "More than I realized until I said the words out loud." They signed the papers the next morning after breakfast, both of them treating the moment with the seriousness it deserved. With their signatures, they became equal partners in the ranch, bound together by law and mutual interest. Marcus produced a small bottle of whiskey from his saddlebags, and they toasted their new venture with a single shot each, the burn of the alcohol seeming to seal the bargain. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Marcus purchased a small herd of 15 cattle, a mix of heifers and a bull, negotiating a good price from a rancher who was looking to thin his stock before winter. Together, he and Penelope worked on improving the grazing land, clearing brush and reinforcing fences to keep the cattle contained and safe from predators. The physical labor was exhausting but satisfying, and Penelope found herself growing stronger as the weeks passed, her body adjusting to the demands of ranch work in ways it had not when she was struggling alone. Marcus was a patient teacher, showing her how to rope and brand cattle, how to spot signs of illness in the herd, and how to make decisions about pasture rotation and breeding. They developed an easy rhythm, working together during the day and sharing meals in the evening. Sometimes they talked for hours about everything and nothing. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, content just to be in each other's presence. Penelope found herself looking forward to these evenings more than she wanted to admit, treasuring the sound of Marcus's laugh and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. But she also found herself struggling with feelings she had not expected and was not sure how to handle. She was attracted to Marcus, there was no denying that, but it was more than physical attraction. She admired his work ethic, his kindness, his steady presence that made her feel safe in ways she had not felt in years. She caught herself watching him when he was not looking, memorizing the way he moved, the sound of his voice, the shape of his hands. It was dangerous territory, and she knew it. They were business partners, and allowing romantic feelings to interfere could jeopardize everything they were building together. Yet she could not seem to help herself, and she wondered if he felt even a fraction of what she was experiencing. One evening in late August, after a particularly long day of mending fences in the brutal heat, they sat on the porch drinking cool water from the well and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Marcus had been quiet all through dinner, and Penelope could sense something weighing on him. "What is troubling you?" she asked finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was careful. "I have been thinking about the future, about what we are building here and where it might lead." "What about it?" Penelope asked, her heart beginning to race. "When we started this partnership, you set clear boundaries about keeping things strictly business," he said, not looking at her. "And I have been trying to respect those boundaries, I truly have. But I need to be honest with you, Penelope. It is getting harder every day." She felt her breath catch in her throat. "What do you mean?" "I mean that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a business arrangement for me," Marcus said, finally turning to meet her eyes. "I look forward to seeing you every morning. I find excuses to be near you during the day. And every night when I go back to that barn, I lie awake thinking about how much I wish things were different between us." Penelope's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Marcus, Wait, let me finish," he said gently. "I am not expecting anything from you. I know you have been through a lot, And the last thing I want to do is make you uncomfortable or put our partnership at risk. But I could not keep lying to you or to myself about how I feel. If you need me to leave, to find another way to honor our agreement without being here in person, I will do it. But I needed you to know the truth first. For a long moment, Penelope could not find words. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You think you are the only one who has been struggling with this? Marcus's eyes widened slightly. What are you saying? I am saying that those boundaries I set were as much for my protection as anything else, Penelope said, her words coming faster now as months of suppressed feelings came pouring out. I was terrified of feeling anything for you because it seemed like a betrayal of my husband's memory. Because I was afraid of being hurt again, because mixing business and personal feelings seemed like a recipe for disaster. But despite all of that, despite every logical reason to keep my distance, I find myself caring for you more each day. And it terrifies me, Marcus. It absolutely terrifies me. He moved closer, taking her hand in his, and the simple touch sent warmth flooding through her. It terrifies me too, he admitted. I have never felt this way about anyone, and I keep waiting for something to go wrong. For you to realize I am not worth the risk. How can you say that? Penelope asked, her free hand coming up to cup his face. You saved my life, Marcus. You saw me at my lowest point, and instead of taking advantage, you offered help and partnership and respect. You have worked tirelessly to build something here, not just for yourself, but for us. How could I possibly think you are not worth the risk? Then what do we do? Marcus asked, his voice rough with emotion. How do we move forward from here? Penelope took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change everything between them. We stop fighting what we both clearly want. We stop pretending this is just business when it stopped being that weeks ago. We take it slow and see where it leads, and we promise to communicate honestly if things start to feel wrong. Are you sure? Marcus asked, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. I do not want you to feel pressured or rushed into anything. I am sure, Penelope said, and realized as she spoke that it was the absolute truth. I have been alone for so long, and I am tired of it. I am tired of being afraid and holding back when there is something good right in front of me. I want to see where this goes, Marcus. I want it more than I have wanted anything in a very long time. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Penelope felt tears running down her cheeks. Why are you crying? Marcus asked, concern evident in his voice. Because I am happy, she said, laughing through her tears. Because for the first time in months, I feel like maybe everything is going to be all right. Marcus pulled her into his arms, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other and the quiet desert night, neither of them needing words to express what they were feeling. The next morning, everything felt different, and yet exactly the same. They still rose early and worked hard, still shared meals and made decisions about the ranch together, but now there was an added layer of intimacy that colored every interaction. Marcus no longer slept in the barn, though they maintained separate bedrooms in the house out of respect for propriety and their own desire to take things slowly. The town of Quartzsite was small enough that news of their arrangement spread quickly, and not everyone was pleased. Some of the more traditional members of the community expressed disapproval of a widow taking up with a man so soon after her husband's death, while others questioned the wisdom of a business partnership that had clearly become something more. Penelope found that she cared less about others' opinions than she might have expected. She and Marcus were building something real and valuable, both in terms of the ranch and their relationship, and the disapproval of narrow-minded gossips was not going to deter her from pursuing happiness. By September, their small herd had grown to include 2 calves, and the cattle were thriving on the improved pasture. Marcus's expertise and Penelope's determination made them an effective team, and they began to develop a reputation for quality stock that attracted buyers from surrounding areas. With the additional income, they were able to make regular payments on Penelope's debts, whittling away at the amount owed with satisfying regularity. Marcus kept meticulous records of every expense and every dollar earned, ensuring that everything remained fair and transparent between them. One evening in early October, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we have not been together very long by conventional standards," he said, his voice nervous in a way she had never heard before. "And I know we have both been cautious about moving too fast. But I also know that I love you, Penelope Jensen, and I cannot imagine my future without you in it." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small but beautiful sapphire set in the center. "This was my mother's ring," he said quietly. "It is the only thing I have left from her, and I would be honored if you would wear it. Will you marry me, Penelope?" Penelope felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were tears of pure joy. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Marcus, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, sealing their engagement with all the solemnity and joy the moment deserved. They were married in November in a simple ceremony at the small church in Quartzsite, with a handful of friends and neighbors in attendance. Penelope wore a dress of pale blue silk that Marcus had insisted on buying for her, and he wore his best suit, his dark hair slicked back and his face clean-shaven for the occasion. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Penelope felt a sense of completeness she had not known was missing. This was different from her first marriage, built on a foundation of genuine partnership and mutual respect rather than youthful infatuation. She and Marcus had seen each other at their worst and their best, had worked side by side through challenges and triumphs, and had chosen each other with full knowledge of what they were getting into. The wedding celebration was modest but joyful, with food and dancing that lasted well into the evening. As Penelope danced with her new husband under strings of lanterns hung between the buildings, she marveled at how much her life had changed in just a few months. She had gone from desperate and starving to secure and loved, from alone to partnered in every sense of the word. That night, in the bedroom they now shared, Marcus held her close and whispered promises of love and devotion that made her heart soar. Their union was tender and passionate, a physical expression of the emotional connection they had been building for months. The winter that followed was mild by Arizona standards, with cool nights and pleasant days that allowed them to continue working on improving the ranch. They built a larger barn to accommodate future expansion, repaired and repainted the house, and added amenities that made their home more comfortable and welcoming. In January, Penelope missed her monthly cycle and realized with a mixture of excitement and trepidation that she was likely pregnant. She waited another month to be certain before telling Marcus, wanting to be absolutely sure before getting his hopes up. When she finally told him over breakfast one morning in February, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face lit up with pure joy, and he swept her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and protested that he would make her dizzy. "We are going to be parents," he said, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Penelope said, covering his hand with hers. "In about 7 months, our family is going to grow by one." The pregnancy was not easy, particularly as the summer heat returned with a vengeance, but Marcus was attentive and caring, taking on more of the physical labor and insisting that Penelope rest frequently. She chafed at the restrictions at first, but eventually accepted that growing a new life required her to slow down and take better care of herself. Their son was born on a hot September evening in 1885, arriving after a long and difficult labor that had Marcus pacing the floor and wearing a path in the boards. When the midwife finally emerged from the bedroom to announce that both mother and baby were healthy, Marcus nearly collapsed with relief. Penelope was exhausted but glowing when he entered the room, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly, and Marcus approached with the reverence of a man entering a sacred space. The baby had dark hair like his father and blue eyes that would eventually turn brown. His tiny fist wrapped around Marcus's finger with surprising strength, and in that moment, Marcus Sullivan felt his entire world shift and realign around this perfect, miraculous new person. "What should we name him?" Marcus asked, unable to take his eyes off his son. "I was thinking Thomas," Penelope said, "after my father, Thomas Jensen Sullivan." "Thomas," Marcus repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "I like it. Welcome to the world, Thomas." Parenthood changed them both in ways they had not anticipated. The ranch work continued, of course, but now everything was filtered through the lens of providing for their child. They hired a young man from town to help with the daily chores, allowing Marcus to spend more time with his family while still keeping the operation running smoothly. By the time Thomas was a year old, the ranch was thriving beyond their initial expectations. Their herd had grown to nearly 50 head of cattle, and they had established contracts with buyers that ensured steady income. The debts that had once threatened to crush Penelope were finally paid off in full, and they even had money set aside in the bank for emergencies and future expansion. In the spring of 1887, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again, and this time the news was met with experienced joy rather than nervous anticipation. Their daughter, Mary Ann, was born in November of that year, a healthy baby with her mother's features and a temperament that was calm and easy from the start. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Marcus and Penelope's love deepened into something rich and enduring. They faced challenges, of course, as all ranchers did, from harsh weather to cattle diseases to fluctuating market prices, but they faced them together, drawing strength from their partnership and their shared commitment to the life they were building. On a warm evening in May of 1890, Penelope stood on the porch of their home, now expanded and improved almost beyond recognition from the crumbling adobe structure Marcus had first encountered. Thomas, now 4 years old, was playing in the yard with their dog, while 2-year-old Mary Ann napped inside under the watchful eye of their housekeeper. Marcus came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "About how different everything is now," Penelope said, leaning back against him. "About how close I came to losing everything, and how you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had not even known how to voice." "I was just a cowboy passing through," Marcus said, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "You were never just anything," Penelope corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "You were exactly what I needed when I needed it most. You saved my life in more ways than one, Marcus Sullivan. And you gave me a home and a purpose when I was just drifting through life," he replied, touching his forehead to hers. "We saved each other, Penelope. That is what makes this so perfect." They kissed, a gentle affirmation of the love and commitment that had sustained them through so much. When they pulled apart, Penelope looked out at their land, at the healthy cattle grazing in the distance, at their son playing happily in the yard, at the life they had built together from nothing but determination and faith. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Taking a chance on a starving widow with nothing to offer but debt and determination?" Marcus laughed, the warm sound carrying across the evening air. "Never. Not for a single moment. You are the best gamble I ever took, and I would do it again in a heartbeat." As the sun set over Quartzsite, painting the desert sky in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus and Penelope stood together on their porch, surrounded by the evidence of their success and the promise of their future. They had started with nothing but hope and hard work, and they had built an empire of their own making, modest perhaps by some standards, but rich beyond measure in the things that truly mattered. The years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Thomas grew into a bright and capable boy who showed an early aptitude for working with horses, while Mary Ann developed a love of reading and learning that reminded Penelope of her own childhood. In 1892, they welcomed another son, Samuel, whose arrival brought fresh joy and chaos to their household. The ranch continued to expand as well, growing to encompass additional acreage as opportunities arose to purchase neighboring land. By 1895, they were running over 200 head of cattle and had become one of the most respected operations in the region. Marcus's reputation for fair dealing and quality stock, combined with Penelope's sharp business sense, made them formidable partners in an industry that was increasingly competitive. They were not without challenges. A severe drought in 1893 tested their resources and resolve, forcing them to dig additional wells and transport water at great expense to keep their herd alive. A bout of influenza swept through the region in 1894, and while their immediate family was spared, several friends and neighbors were not as fortunate. Through it all, they supported each other with the same dedication and commitment they had shown from the beginning. When Penelope struggled with exhaustion and worry, Marcus was there to shoulder more of the burden and provide comfort. When Marcus doubted his decisions or questioned whether they were doing enough, Penelope reminded him of how far they had come and steadied his resolve. Their marriage was not perfect, no marriage ever was, but it was built on foundations that weathered every storm. They argued occasionally, usually about business decisions or parenting approaches, but they had learned early on to communicate openly and resolve conflicts before they could fester into resentment. One particularly memorable argument occurred in the summer of 1896 when Marcus wanted to invest in a new breeding bull that cost more than Penelope thought was prudent. They debated the matter for days, each presenting their case with passion and conviction until finally reaching a compromise that satisfied both of their concerns. "You drive me crazy sometimes," Penelope said after they had finally agreed on a solution, but she was smiling as she said it. "Right back at you," Marcus replied, pulling her close and kissing her soundly. "But I would not have it any other way. Life with you is never boring, Penelope Sullivan." As their children grew older, Marcus and Penelope made a point of teaching them the value of hard work and honest dealing. Thomas, at 11 years old, was already capable of handling many ranch responsibilities, and he took pride in his contributions. Mary Ann, at 9, helped her mother with the household accounts and correspondence, showing an aptitude for numbers that delighted both her parents. And little Samuel, still only 4, was already following his older siblings around and trying to imitate everything they did. In the evenings, after the day's work was done and the children were in bed, Marcus and Penelope would sit together on their porch, a ritual they had maintained since those early days of their courtship. Sometimes they talked about business matters or family concerns. Other times they simply sat in comfortable silence, enjoying each other's presence. "Do you remember the first time you came here?" Penelope asked one night in late summer of 1897. "When I was so desperate and proud that I almost sent you away?" "I remember thinking you were the most stubborn woman I had ever met," Marcus said with a chuckle. "And also the bravest. You were starving, but you fed your animals first. That told me everything I needed to know about your character." "I was terrified," Penelope admitted. "Terrified of accepting help. Terrified of what it might mean. Terrified of feeling anything for anyone ever again." "And now?" Marcus asked, taking her hand in his. "Now I am grateful for every choice that led us to this moment," she said. "Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of doubt and fear. It was all worth it to end up here with you." They kissed, a gesture as familiar as breathing after so many years together, yet still capable of making Penelope's heart skip a beat. The love she felt for Marcus had only deepened with time, growing richer and more complex as they built their life together. In 1899, as the century drew to a close, they celebrated their 8th wedding anniversary with a trip to Tucson, leaving the children in the capable hands of their housekeeper and the ranch foreman they had hired the previous year. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours since Samuel's birth, and they savored the opportunity to reconnect as a couple rather than just parents and business partners. They stayed in a hotel, a luxury they rarely indulged in, and spent their days exploring the city and their evenings enjoying dinners at fine restaurants. Marcus bought Penelope a new dress, a beautiful creation in deep green silk that made her eyes shine, and she bought him a fine leather-bound journal for recording ranch business. On their last night before returning home, as they lay together in their hotel room, Penelope traced patterns on Marcus's chest and reflected on how much they had accomplished together. When I think about where I was before you came into my life, it feels like a different lifetime, she said softly, like it happened to someone else entirely. You would have found a way, Marcus said, running his fingers through her hair. You are too strong and too determined to have given up. Maybe, Penelope conceded. But it would not have been like this. It would not have been us, building something together, raising a family together, growing old together. You did not just save my ranch, Marcus. You saved me. Then we are even, he replied, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. Because you saved me too. I was drifting, Penelope, going through the motions of living, but not really alive. You gave me a purpose and a home and a love I never thought I would find. Every day with you is a gift. They made love slowly and tenderly, a reaffirmation of the bond that had sustained them through so much. When they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, both were smiling, content in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. The new century brought new challenges and opportunities. The children continued to grow and develop their own interests and personalities. Thomas, now 15, was becoming a skilled horseman and had expressed interest in eventually taking over management of the ranch. Mary Ann, at 13, was torn between her love of learning and her desire to help with the family business. And Samuel, at 8 years old, was emerging as the family comedian, always ready with a joke or a prank to lighten the mood. In 1902, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again, much to her surprise. At 39 years old, she had thought her childbearing days were behind her, but life had other plans. The pregnancy was difficult, complicated by her age and the physical demands of ranch life, but she was determined to see it through. Marcus was nervous throughout, hovering over her with a protectiveness that was both touching and occasionally suffocating. When she gently pointed this out, he apologized but admitted he could not help worrying about her. You are not a young woman anymore, he said, then immediately realized how that sounded. Not that you are old, I did not mean it like that. Penelope laughed despite her discomfort. I know what you meant, and you are right. This pregnancy is harder than the others were, but I am strong, Marcus, and I have the best care available. Everything will be fine. And it was. Their second daughter, Elizabeth Rose, was born in early spring of 1903, a healthy baby who resembled her mother so strongly it was almost uncanny. Her arrival brought fresh joy to the household, and her older siblings doted on her with a devotion that warmed her parents' hearts. As the children grew and the ranch prospered, Marcus and Penelope began to think about legacy and the future they wanted to leave behind. They had built something substantial from almost nothing, but they wanted to ensure it would continue to thrive for generations to come. They set up legal arrangements to ensure the ranch would pass to their children in equal shares, with provisions for management and decision-making that would prevent conflicts. They also established a small scholarship fund for children in Quartzsite who wanted to pursue education but lacked the financial means, remembering their own struggles and wanting to help others who faced similar challenges. In 1908, Thomas married a young woman from town named Catherine, and the following year they welcomed Marcus and Penelope's first grandchild, a boy named after his grandfather. The arrival of little Marcus Jr. filled the original Marcus with a pride and joy that was almost overwhelming. I never thought I would live to see grandchildren, he admitted to Penelope one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset. When I was drifting from place to place, working other men's ranches, I thought I would die alone with nothing to show for my life. But you did not, Penelope said, squeezing his hand. You found me, or I found you, or maybe we found each other. And look at what we have built together. 3 children, with a fourth still at home, a grandson, a ranch that spans hundreds of acres, a community that respects us, and most importantly, we have each other. We have each other, Marcus echoed, and the simple words carried the weight of 24 years of marriage, partnership, and love. Marianne eventually decided to pursue teaching, opening a small school on the ranch property that served children from surrounding farms and ranches. She married at 22 to a banker from Tucson, and though she moved away, she visited frequently and remained close to her family. Samuel, true to his adventurous spirit, spent several years working on various ranches throughout the territory before eventually returning home to help manage the family operation. He brought with him a wealth of knowledge and new techniques that helped modernize their practices and increase efficiency. And little Elizabeth, no longer so little, grew into a strong-willed young woman who had her mother's determination and her father's gentle nature. She showed an interest in veterinary medicine, unusual for a woman of her time, but her parents supported her ambitions and helped her pursue education in the field. By 1915, Marcus and Penelope were in their 50s, still active in managing the ranch, but gradually turning over more responsibility to the next generation. They had achieved everything they had once dreamed of and more, building not just a successful business, but a legacy of love and partnership that would endure long after they were gone. One evening in late autumn of that year, as they sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Do you remember that first meal we shared?" she asked Marcus. "When you brought food for me and my animals and stayed for dinner?" "Of course I remember," Marcus said, his arm around her shoulders. "That was the night I knew my life was about to change, though I did not realize how much at the time." "I was so hungry," Penelope said softly. "Not just for food, though that was certainly part of it, but hungry for hope, for connection, for a reason to keep fighting. And you gave me all of that and more." "We gave it to each other," Marcus corrected gently. "That is what makes our story special, Penelope. We both needed saving, and we found salvation in partnership and love." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink as it sank toward the horizon. Their grandchildren's laughter rang out across the yard, a sound that never failed to bring smiles to their faces. "I would not change a single thing," Penelope said finally. "Not the hardships, not the challenges, not even the moments of doubt and fear. It all led us here to this perfect life we have built together." "Neither would I," Marcus agreed, kissing her temple tenderly. "You are still the best gamble I ever took, Mrs. Sullivan." "And you are still my savior, Mr. Sullivan," she replied, turning to kiss him properly. "In every way that matters." As darkness fell over Quartzsite, Arizona, Marcus and Penelope Sullivan sat together on the porch of their ranch house, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and a love that had endured every test. They had started with nothing but determination and faith, brought together by circumstances that might have broken lesser people. Instead, they had forged a partnership that transcended business, a love that grew stronger with each passing year, and a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. Their children and grandchildren would carry forward the values they had worked so hard to instill, and the ranch they had built from desperation and hope would thrive for generations to come. In the years that followed, as they gradually slowed down and let the younger generation take over more of the daily operations, Marcus and Penelope never lost sight of what mattered most. They remained devoted to each other, to their family, and to the land that had given them so much. When Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1928 at the age of 72, Penelope mourned the loss of her partner, her love, and her best friend. But she also celebrated the 44 years they had spent together, years filled with more joy and accomplishment than many people experience in twice that time. She lived another 7 years, staying active in ranch management and taking great pleasure in watching her grandchildren and great-grandchildren grow. When she finally joined Marcus in 1935, at the age of 72 herself, she went with a smile on her face and peace in her heart. The ranch they had built together continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, a lasting testament to what two people could accomplish when they combined determination, hard work, and love. The story of how Marcus Sullivan had ridden onto Penelope Jensen's failing ranch one hot summer day and changed both their lives forever became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And though the details might have varied slightly with each telling, the essence remained the same, a story of hope in the face of despair, of generosity rewarded, and of love found in the most unexpected of circumstances. It was a story that celebrated the power of human connection and the transformative nature of partnership, a reminder that sometimes salvation comes not from grand gestures, but from simple acts of kindness offered at exactly the right moment. In the end, Marcus and Penelope Sullivan's greatest legacy was not the land they had accumulated or the wealth they had generated, but the example they had set for how to live with integrity, how to love without reservation, and how to build something lasting in a world that often seemed determined to tear things down. They had shown that with determination, faith, and a partner who believed in you, anything was possible. Their story began with starvation and ended in abundance, started with desperation and finished in contentment, commenced with solitude and concluded in family. And at its heart was a simple truth that resonated across the generations, that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected sources, and that love, when nurtured with care and respect, can transform not just individual lives, but entire legacies. The ranch house still stood decades later, expanded and modernized, but retaining elements of the original structure that Marcus had repaired all those years ago. The windmill he had fixed on that first day continued to turn, bringing water to the land and serving as a symbol of the day everything changed. And on the porch where they had sat for so many evenings, sharing their dreams and building their future, their descendants continued the tradition, sitting together as the sun set over the Arizona desert and remembering the love story that had started it all. Marcus and Penelope Sullivan had taken a chance on each other when both were at their lowest, and in doing so, they had created something beautiful and enduring. Their story was a testament to the power of compassion, the importance of partnership, and the transformative nature of love. It was a story that began with a simple act of kindness, a cowboy bringing food for a starving woman and her animals, and staying for dinner, and grew into a legacy that would inspire generations to come. And in that legacy, in the lives they had touched, and the family they had created, Marcus and Penelope Sullivan achieved a kind of immortality that no amount of wealth or fame could ever provide. They lived on in the stories told around dinner tables, in the values passed down through the generations, and in the enduring example of what two people could accomplish when they chose to face life's challenges together, bound by love and sustained by unwavering faith in each other. Their journey from desperation to triumph, from loneliness to love, from struggle to success became more than just their story. It became a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes in our lives come from unexpected encounters, that kindness begets kindness, and that love, when given freely and nurtured with care, has the power to transform everything it touches. Marcus Sullivan rode onto a failing ranch in 1884 with nothing but good intentions and a desire to help, and in doing so, he found not just a business opportunity, but a soulmate, a partner, and a love that would define the rest of his life. Penelope Jensen, starving and desperate but still caring for her animals, found not just salvation from her immediate circumstances, but a future filled with hope, prosperity, and a love that exceeded her wildest dreams. Together, they proved that even in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of the American West, beauty could bloom, love could flourish, and two people who were willing to take a chance on each other could build an empire of the heart that would last forever.